And let me add my congratulations to Danielle and thanks for taking over this fine group. My background is also in cataloging, so I concur that this is the best committee in any consortium is always the cataloging committee. So thank you for having me here today. Let me see if I can share my screen and start. I do have a small presentation that I want you to be able to see. I'm going to turn off my video because my head's on a swivel if I don't otherwise. So do that, and now I can share my screen. And you should be seeing what is now a slideshow.
Yep.
Does it look good? Great. I'm going to bring chat out of the way there. And I do have just a few slides to go over, well, more than a few actually, to just introduce authorities at a high level, an overview. I'm going to be using your test system after I finish these few slides so that we can look at look at some of the concepts that I talk about together while looking at your actual data and your actual database. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to either pipe up on with your microphone if you're connected, or just drop a note in the chat. I'm watching that. And Danielle or Kat, if I miss anything, please let me know, and I will keep an eye on that chat box, but I might miss it as I'm talking. Because I do get very excited about authorities because they can be such a wonderful thing and so frustrating at the same time. I will be honest about that. But knowing how they work in Evergreen and how to make them work for you is really the key. So, hello, that's me. I am the product and education manager, as my very, very brief introduction there. I've been with Equinox 5 years now, and before that, I was technical services manager in public libraries for about 10 years before that. So my background is definitely in cataloging, but I've been working with Evergreen and trying to tackle authorities since my time in public libraries before I came to Evergreen. So probably 2017, I was looking yesterday when I started my first authorities project. So this is a long time passion project of mine. Today, I thought I'd just do a basic, just authority control defined. We're catalogers. We know what authority control is, but it gives me a good starting point that we can just jump off and talk more about the primary functionality. I always come back to what do we really want authorities to do, putting aside all the things that it can do and the very level of nuance and granularity that we can get into, but what do you really need it? Provide some resources for you, and then look at Evergreen and how things are working today. So as an overview, I'll just start with the authority control, of course. It's just a means to provide consistency. And I highlighted the four terms that we have here. When we talk about authority control, it's a very unique subset of the data on a MARC record. They're your names, and names not just authors, but names that are used anywhere in a MARC record, your 100s, your 700s, your 600s, but also the uniform title. Again, not title specifically, but uniform title, series title, and with your permission, I'm going to kind of skip over series in my presentation, but if you want to talk about series after the presentation, I'll be glad to. As series themselves are not traced the way they once were by the Library of Congress, so finding an official series, authorized series title is not as prevalent as it used to be, but you can certainly do that on a local level. So that might be something we want to revisit in the future. I did leave it out of this just in the interest of time, but again, if you have series questions, I'll be glad to address those. And of course, subjects. We spent a lot of time talking about subject headings in the various forms they take. And the reasons you would want authority control, this is pulling from several different authority presentations I've done over the years, but I don't need to spend a lot of time here convincing you that authority control is important because you're already doing it. And that's why we're here, is talking about how we can continue to make sure that you're optimizing the use of authority control in Evergreen. But one of the things that I like to revisit when we talk about authority control is the collocation. Because whether you're using one thesaurus or multiple thesauri, you'll want to make sure that they're being applied consistently, so that if you have a book about Leonardo da Vinci, he ends up in the L's because his name is Leonardo. Da Vinci is where he's from. It's not his last name. But that sort of thing, that you're considering where your materials are going to end up on the shelf and where your patrons are going to find them in your digital world as well. So collocation is a very important part of this, as well as just standardization and discoverability, both for patrons and staff. And one of the things we often overlook is how authority control can assist with reporting. So I like to add that as a little added benefit. And then do you really make the most of authority control? It's really just a 5-step process, easy peasy. You establish your best practices, how you want authorities to work in your system, recognizing just because you have authorized vocabulary doesn't mean that you cannot create a process for using and applying authority control that is not unique to your needs, which leads us to standardized vocabularies. You can implement multiple thesaurus options. I'm not going to walk through how to implement that because that's more of a going through the server administration steps. I'll be glad to work with you when I know that you're going to look at this later in the spring to set this up. So since you don't have multiple thesauri completely set up in your system now, I will show you where it will live and how it'll be very easy to identify multiple vocabularies within Evergreen without having to do a lot of acrobatic searching. So once you've determined the vocabularies you want to use, and also importantly, the ones you don't want to use, because if you're using records from vendors or OCLC or, well, just Library of Congress, there may be lots of subject headings you might want to exclude. So we'll look at ways you can add those to your best practices as well. Then after you've decided on your vocabularies, you simply link them together. And I chuckle because when I say simply link them together, that's what I'm going to spend most of our time talking about is what does that linking actually look like in Evergreen? Whether it's a manual process or an automated one or a hybrid version, you may be doing both. Then also consider you can adopt local and custom practices. And I like to repeat that because one of the things that was rather freeing to me when I was first working with authorities is the idea that while I can use multiple existing thesaurus options, I can create my own too. You can have a local thesaurus if you have things that are unique to your area, to your libraries, just things as simple as events that happen in your town, and you want to be able to. In my case, if we wanted to do things like we do ladies' night out on Main Street. So if I wanted that to be a subject heading, I can create that so that it's updated the same year after year, and then we can uh, capture those artifacts that go along with that because we have all kinds of fun things that are published around that. And then lastly, it's just maintaining your records. And often you just work with a vendor to do that, an authority control vendor, which is not Evergreen, other than we can be helpful in moving records in and out of the system. The authority control vendors that I mentioned here, either Marchive or Backstage, I think are the last two in the industry these days working on those. But record maintenance can also be just individually drawing attention to records that you might need to update or merge or even delete at some point if you're not using them, for just keeping the data set as clean as it can be. All of those are big things to talk about. I introduced those at this point with an idea more to keep us at rather a high level discussion today, but I will revisit these topics. I'll come back to this screen actually this slide when we're wrapping up to see if there are any conversations we'll want to follow up on after today on these topics. So let's look at an authority record. We'll do this in Evergreen too, but to give us a starting place, I should have said that I will be sharing these slides, of course. So I will do that as soon as the presentation's over. I'll send these, I'll send them to everybody that I have an email address for so that they can be readily shared. Looking at authority record, an authority record is, of course, a different record than a bibliographic record. However, it is still today in the MARC 21 format. I say that because authority records will be one of those things that'll march us towards whatever the next thing may be other than MARC. We're going to need some way to apply consistent standards, and authority records are going to be that path forward. But for today, we're very much still in the MARC world in Evergreen and in most ILSs. And I'm not going to say BibFrame today, other than I just did, but that's the last time. So for now, we're very much looking at authority data in the same way we look at a bib record. It just has different field definitions. So these are your fixed fields. And the first thing I want to point out here is in your fixed fields, the first identifier here is your type. So this is your type of record. And if you're accustomed to looking at the enhanced MARC editor, your type of editor is on your monograph records too. And well, actually all of your MARC records. But here on the authority record, that Z indicates it's authority data that you're going to be looking at. And that's what you're going to be using almost exclusively on an authority record, because that Z is what you just need to be able to set the rules for the rest of the fields. That Z comes out of the leader, position 06 on the authority record. And we'll look at where the rest of these are coming from and what they might mean if you are interpreting an authority record. And I'll show you where to find them in the database. Continuing on with the same authority record, here's the Z. These other fields that you see here, this is your subject use, your serial use, your type, which means your subject type, and then I've also pulled out your name use. And I've pulled out the definitions here as well. So if I am using this one, and this happens to be an authority record for Walter Isaacson, so it's an author, it's a name authority record. So if I look at my name, the A tells me, yes, it's appropriate to use for a name. So I can use it in any of my name fields. Again, my author, my added entries. So I can use it for name. Here's my subject use. Yes, it's appropriate for subject because I might read a book about Walter Isaacson in addition to by Walter Isaacson, but not so much for serials, not so much for any kind of subdivision of a topic because it's hard to subdivide a single name into chronological and has nothing to do with his date of birth. So he's not going to exist over different centuries in different places. That would just be a different subject heading entirely. So if I want to interpret this record, it tells authority record, it says that yes, I can use it for name. Yes, I can use it for subject, but not anything else. I'll pause here to say Evergreen does not enforce this rule. This is simply just the authority definition itself. So if you're bringing authority records in batch and then find yourself reviewing them later, just out of, quizzical to see what's there, or if you are adding a new record, it helps to know what these things actually are with your fixed fields. At this point, I do not believe we have a very clear definition in each one of those right-click fields that'll tell you what each one of your options are. I think you just kind of have to know, and that's one of the wish list bugs that's out there in the Evergreen community to go through and put in a context menu for each one of these. But for now, I've given you the very quick shorthand of A or B. A is yes, B is no for appropriateness, and then the subject has a few more options there. Not something you probably do a lot is look at the fixed fields on an authority record, but I thought we would start there because it's always nice to have context. And this is probably really, really small on your screen. We're going to look at authority records together. But I wanted to say some of the other things you get from an authority record, and we will go look at Library of Congress authority records. We'll search so we can see where you might be pulling these from if you're going to look up and want to confirm, for example, what the preferred format of a name is for a particular author. But here's the kinds of things that will help you identify if you have the right Walter Isaacson. There just happens to be only one in this place. I had an old friend who always used Mark Twain as the option because there were so many different things you could do with Mark Twain, but I wanted to keep this one simple. If you read let me go back. This link takes you to the definition, the Mark 21 definition of the authority records. It'll, just like a bib record, it tells you field by field, tag by tag, what each of these tags will be. So here, the 046 is the birth date. So he's born in 1952. There's his name. This is the actual row I want. And I'll look at that when we come back. And then if I'm still trying to determine if he's the right guy, here I can see he's associated with Aspen Institute, not the new Discovery software. His occupation, he's an author, and there's some citation here about where this data, the source of the data that was found. And then here we can see at the very, very bottom, I know that's small there, that TRUE is actually your code that you're using to indicate that it's been linked to an authority record. So there's your authority record number. But it kind of helps to just know when you're looking at an authority record that these are the kinds of things that will be available to help you determine if you've got the right one. Again, this is a pretty simple example. I didn't want to be tricky today, and I didn't want to provide any trick questions. I just wanted to be able to highlight some of the things that are available for you in choosing an authority record. That's it. Here's the Library of Congress. This is where our primary stop, our first stop for finding an authorized value. Even if you just want to check to see if this is the right version of the name that you want to use. Has there been a change? Did somebody get married, get divorced? Has there been a death date that's been added? Somebody changed their name for any particular reason, or they're writing under a pen name and you want to see which one is, if there should be a C also on there. This is where you go. And I have an example, and we're going to look at these together, but here are your different search types. So this is probably the trickiest thing, other than if you're just looking for a name. That's the easiest thing. But if you're looking for a subject or a title or a name and title combination, you can always just do a keyword search. But knowing which search type to choose is key to finding an authority record. If you've ever found yourself looking for William Shakespeare and you discover, why on earth can I not just type in Shakespeare, William and find it? It's because he lives under the name title authority records instead of just the name. Because to limit the number of options you'll get, And in response to your search results, you're going to need to indicate which work you're looking at. And that was always one of the things that would trip me up. It's like, I really just want to know how I should list his name. But instead, I have to look for a particular title to go along with that name, and I have to put the name in first. Sounds confusing, but there are lots of really good hints on the bottom of the screen that I did not copy, but we'll go look there in a moment together. And this is probably a good place to stop for that. My next few slides will talk about authorities in Evergreen, and I've got this is my cheat sheet, and I just converted it into a slide for you on how to search for the Library of Congress authorities specifically. And then after that, I'm going to just do a few more intro things before we look at an actual record in Evergreen. But I think I'm going to pause here and look at that Library of Congress search and see if you have any questions about using this Library of Congress search. Recognizing this is just for when you're probably going to use this most often, when you just want to check for yourself if it's the right heading, whether it's a name or a subject. If you're getting records that are coming from a vendor and they're being updated on a regular basis, you're not necessarily, fact checking what they're sending you. But if you're bringing in a new record and you're bringing in a new author, or if you just want to add subject headings that were missing, perhaps this is your first stop that you want to go to. I grab a sip of water there. So let me just go back. We'll go over to Library of Congress authorities. This system may go down from time to time, like many other systems, but it's also good just to check in with each other if you find that happening, because it is something that it's probably not on you. It's probably on them. It's not you, it's them if the site goes down. I haven't seen that happen in a little bit, but it was having some trouble at the end of the last year. Make this a little bigger. So if I'm searching for, in this case, I'm going to use Marie Benedict. If I'm searching for an authority record, I have to know the form, and quite simply for names, you put the last name first. How do I know that? Well, I can look at the authority search tips that are on this screen. So if I'm looking for name, it tells me I enter the surname first. For other names, I can enter in direct order. So if I was looking for RuPaul, I just type in RuPaul. Otherwise, if I'm looking for Marie Benedict, which I'm looking for today, I have to put the last name first. And it also tells if they're left anchored, and it'll tell us the truncation is automatic, so you don't have to worry about that. It also tells us everything that will be searched when you choose this name heading. It's going to look for personal names, family names, corporate meeting, all of those names, all that you would typically see in that 100 series on a bib record. So this is where you're going to find anything that might have a name, including things like the World Wildlife Fund, if you're looking for publications from them, if you're looking for any kind of corporate information like that. But I'm just going to start with a personal name here. You can see some of the other options they have here. This will tell you everything it's searching, and I think it's easy to forget that this is here, and there is really good information. So if I'm searching for a subject, it gets the Library of Congress subject headings, it gets their genre form thesaurus, and it gets other things like medical headings. And I'll show you how my cheat sheet helps me remember all of this too. And then again, here's your title and your name and title. And here's my example from William Shakespeare. It helps to even know what year he was born and died. But you can't just use William Shakespeare 1564. Now, unless you're using an older author like that, a classic author like that, something as simple as a keyword search may work. So let's go back and let's just search by name. And I'm looking for any questions that might come in chat, because if you've seen this before, this might just be boring to you. And so Teresa, I'm trying to go through it rather quickly. But if you're looking for results in the Library of authorities, of course, you're looking for an authorized heading, not one that just has references. I'm looking in this case for Marie Benedict. She only has the one name that shows up. But when I click on her entry that says authorized headings, I now see that there are two options. I have the See Also of Heather Terrell. I did not know she wrote under another name until I started preparing for this one. So thank you for that opportunity to learn a little more. But this will show me if she's written under any other names as well. So out of curiosity, I'm just going to click on that one. And it will take me to the actual authority record for her pen name. So I want to check at that. Now I can see how the See Also, just to show you how those will work. so that it works on both sides of the equation here. If I want to get to Marie Benedict by searching for her pen name, or if I want to get to her pen name by searching for Marie Benedict, I get there in both ways. So let's see what Heather Terrell's authority record looks like. It gives me the 1XX heading. This is where my cheat sheet comes in. So here's that authority record, and I've already shown you what it looks like a little bit here. So once I look through here, there's my 08. But what I get is there's Heather Terrell. She was, she's associated with Pittsburgh. She's worked at Boston College. She was a lawyer. Yes, indeed, she was. Here's another name that she's known by. So when I bring in this authority record, if I search for Heather Terrell or Marie Benedict, I will get any bib record that's associated with this authority record. It links them together. And then we get examples of some of the things that she's written. And it even tells us there's a pseudonym as well, so that we get a little more information there. Let's go back. I actually want to look at both of them. So now here you can see if you use the actual authority record for the real person, not her pen name, we get a little more information. There's her name. We get more information about the titles that she's written under that name as well. So this is the one I want because this is her real name. And that's the one I would want to bring in. I believe it's already in your system. But here's the other trick here. If you find that it's not already in your system and you do not want to wait until the next time your records are sent out and then come back for any kind of authority control working with a vendor, you can download from this site. And so here's your select your download format. You just use a simple mark. Unicode works fine. UTF-8 there. And then you just press to save or print. You do these one at a time. So if we were to do that, it's now been downloaded as an MRC. So then I could, if I needed to bring over more than one, I could just combine these using MarcEdit or any kind of editor that I have, combine them into multiple records into one field to bring them in. So I don't have to import them all at once, but I do have to download them at once. But you can download records from the Library of Congress authorities. I wouldn't call it in batch, but I would call it that you can batch them yourself, doing them one at a time if you need that. Otherwise, this is just how you confirm how the name may be. And I have an example that I'm going to come back to the Library of Congress authorities after we find a discrepancy in your system. So we'll be back there in a moment. Any questions about searching Library of Congress authorities while I go back and bring up my cheat sheet? Okay, so my cheat sheet here, and yes, I know it's color-coded and it's something I did many years ago, and I'm hoping that it doesn't necessarily fail too many of the accessibility rules that I have learned in the time since then. But what I have in is green. Yes, I know it's color-coded, but is if you're searching for a name, this is probably where you're going to use that value. So it's not just a one-to-one entry. So you're not just looking for, again, I'll use Walter Isaacson as my example there. I can use Walter Isaacson as my main entry. I can use him as a subject access, or I can use him as an added entry if he's a co-author of a work. So if I find a name authority record, I can then pull it into out of that 100 tag on the authority record. I can then use it in my bib record 100, 600, or 700. Similarly, if I bring in a name of the World Wildlife Fund and I'm looking at some of their publications, I can use that right out of the authority record and drop it into my 110, my 610, or my 710 out of the bibliographic record. So all of these indicators are telling me where they go in the bib record. Meeting name's the same. The title is, I always have to remind myself that I'm looking for uniform titles, not the 245 field. I'm not looking for just the title of the work. I'm looking for if I needed a uniform title. Often this can be done if you have any kind of foreign language that's associated with it, or sometimes just if we've gotten like the Harry Potter series, which one, the British title or the English title is the uniform title. So it can be used in the uniform title fields, but it can also be used in the subject access and added entry tags as well. So hopefully this helps when you say, okay, I found a name. Now what can I use it for? Then I pull right off of that 1XX from the authorized access point and drop it right in there, 100 or 600. And then my subject headings, kind of the same. So if we go back to the authorities, it says it's going to search all of these things. If I do a subject search, it's going to look for the Library of Congress subject heading. It's going to look for the genre form thesaurus. It's easier for me to say the LCGFT, and I have links to all of these resources. So then you can decide if it's a topical term, geographic name. And then you might also need to check this GSAFT. These are things like if you're looking for things like action films, that kind of genre form belong there. I'm not going to talk a lot about about any of these subdivided subjects. I'm going to look at them very, very briefly. This is one of those things that Evergreen could certainly use improvement with, is working with the variants of subdivisions that you may have. And for subdivision, I mean things as simple as the word fiction. So if I'm talking about, balloons and juvenile fiction, those two things are actually two different authority records. So balloons alone, balloons, juvenile fiction is a different entry. If I'm talking about Old West, if I'm talking about things like stories from the prairie, then you get Little House on the Prairie. But then I can do things that go all the way out to the different time periods. So if I then get to it's post Civil War in particular date range in a particular state, all of those things are what we would call just subdivided geographies and times actually. So at that point, I'm going to show you kind of what happens when you try to link, but it doesn't match precisely. So here's my cheat sheet. You're welcome to use it, or if it's confusing to you, you're welcome to just kind of use it as something that can improve your own cheat sheets as well. It's going to lead us to, I'm going to hop into Evergreen here in a moment now. So when you find an authority record, I'm going to show you where you can find those. You probably already have a good sense of where you can find them, but I'm going to walk through just the 3 different ways you can find an authority record in Evergreen. Now, we've talked about where you can find the Library of Congress, and let me back up to the resources here, not just Library of Congress, but here's a list of different, what we'll call Library of Congress is a controlled set, and these are individual thesaurus entries. So the subject headings, the genre form, the GSAFD there. This is an international authority file, and a link to the Homosaurus as well, which tends not to be subdivided, which actually makes it easier to use, which is fantastic. So I'm going to leave all of those there as options for you to find an authority. But once you have, and now you've got it in Evergreen, or you're pulling it into Evergreen to start using it within Evergreen, there are 3 ways you can look for an authority record. So we'll hop over there and look at those. And then I'm going to talk about, and we'll look at this specific record when we get over there as well, about how the authority records and the BIB records talk to one another. And they talk to one another through linking. And so let me show you precisely what that looks like. So on this BIB record, and I'm not on an authority record now, I'm on a BIB record, I can start looking at the things that are controlled by authorities. So only those things that entertain authorized vocabularies. So here's my 100. There's my name value, my Walter Isaacson. And this is my link. That 0 indicates that I am linked to an authority record. So that 0 subfield is what tells me that it is linked. This TRUE in parentheses, that is how we know that is your authority record. So this 107374 is actually the authority ID. So if we want to go look up that one, I will show you how to search by ID too. If you get this far and you go, I'd like to look at that. There's another way to do that as well. You can click on this little link and I'll show you that. But I'm just going to show you all the ways you can find an authority record. And then all the ways you can ask yourself, well, why can't I do it in a different way? Very good questions. And we should put those in wish list items. But here we are. So I know this one is linked. It has a nice little link there. I'll show you how that actually works when we get over there in Evergreen. So I know that this one has been assigned to an authority record. It has a number, and there's the 0. Also want to point out the second indicators become ever so important when you're looking at subject headings. One of the things that was promised I would talk about, and I'm doing it in a brief way here, is how you would identify what thesaurus you are using, and it's done with indicators. Now, you're not going to have a second indicator for every different thesaurus in a control set or in multiple control sets. What you're going to have instead are your standard identifiers, so that 0, in the second indicator here for some pretty straightforward things like artists, scientists, gifted persons. That 0 just means it comes from the Library of Congress subject heading. That's just a standard that's been around for a very long time. And you'll notice that 3 of the 4 of these have authority records linked to them. Gifted persons does not. So we're going to look at that one as an example of what we might do in that situation. And then here's one that's even a little less information. I've got a 4 that says it's simply not specified. So we have biography. And again, I would argue that biography may not be a subject heading. This is just me, but I'm going to share my quirky point of view in an effort to embolden you to make this work for you the way you want your local system to do, with the caveat of just make sure you're all doing it the same way. But if you can agree on a particular process for things like this, and I will say things like this, things like biography or large print, to me, that's not a subject heading. It's not about a biography. It is a biography. To me, the biographies in the 655 actually makes a lot more sense, because 655 is a genre. What it is, it's not a subject, what it is about. In my world of trying to put together some consistency and implementing this on a local level, I would suggest things like perhaps we don't keep biography in a 650. Perhaps it needs to live in a 655 only, and perhaps you want to take that out, especially since it's not being tied to any particular thesaurus. This is at a granular level that doesn't really affect your patrons at all, doesn't really affect your staff searching. So you can also ask yourself, is it worth it spending this amount of time taking out biography? Answer is probably no. But if it certainly would save you some time from not adding it in there, if you can just do that in a 655 instead. There's my tiny little soapbox about genres that show up in subject headings. And then I've already foreshadowed there what comes next. So there's your 655s. These are your genres. With a note that it gives you a 7 in your second indicator, which means your source is identified in your subfield 2. This is how your homosaurus subjects will show up, whether they're subjects or genres. You'll have a 7 that says it's not one of the regular, the old original thesaurus indicators, thesaurus codes. Instead, you'll just drop it in a 2. And I believe the homosaurus code, and there is a standard one, is, I think it's HOMOIT. I will follow up with you on that, though. I had it in my notes, and it's in, no. Yes, it's HOMOIT is what would show up here. So as you start bringing those in, this is how you would be able to identify it, is it would have a 2 subfield that has that particular code there. And it would also still be linked. It wouldn't show any differently. It would still say that, yes, this TRUE is representing your consortium, and then the record number that goes with it. And then here, I guess you can kind of see at the bottom. Again, I said that you could use the name entry in both a 100 and a 700. So here's your extra author, your added author there for your narrator. So Alfred Molina, if we looked him up, it's the same thing from an authority record. He could be used in the 700 or the 100 as well. So big takeaways here. How do you know that's been linked? Again, this is a bib record. It'll show you in a 0. You can see here this one has not been linked to an authority record. And also use your indicators to know what the source is coming from. Any questions about that? I know I talk very quickly. I do want to get into Evergreen, though, so I'm rushing a little. Okay, moving on. Very, very quickly. So where the records come from, I feel like you probably are, we're beyond that in this conversation, but it is one I just like to repeat because it's going to have me talking about, so how do you get these records to link together? So of course, where they come from, you're either batch importing records from a service provider, you are working with them individually by importing records from something like Library of Congress or the Homosaurus that you can also export out of, or you're manually creating them. That last piece is what I want to look at while we're together, is how do you go about manually creating these or manually linking them, and why might you need to manually link them? And then, of course, I say after you've done all of that, there's much celebration. So here's your workflow. I'm kind of repeating myself here, but if you're batch loading bib records, you're going to batch load them as you always do, or anytime you bring in a record. Your authorities are going to link overnight. And Elizabeth says you're working with Backstage. Great. On a quarterly basis. Very good information to have, Elizabeth. Thank you. I didn't know how frequently, so let me jot that down. So if you're doing these quarterly, that helps me to give a little more information here too. So if you don't want to wait, if it's just happened and you don't want to wait 3 months, you want to go ahead, because you know how to add an authority. I'll show you how to work with that. But if you're loading bib records again here, your authority, if you already have an authority record, so you're getting the latest James Patterson, excuse me for that example, but it's always the one that comes to mind. So if you've loaded a bib record for the newest James Patterson, he's already in there. So overnight, your authorities are going to link to your bib records. You don't have to go through any extra step. And I verified this with our support guys yesterday that this is going to happen automatically. If, however, you are bringing over a bib record and it for a brand new author, obviously that would require a little work on your side. And again, if you don't want to wait until it goes out and comes back, then I'll show you how you can add that record. This adding bib records individually. And I have added a note here, the authority link can be done manually or wait for overnight process. I'll show you how you do that. But I did say make sure it's been reviewed that you're using a valid authorized value. And this is again where you go out and you check the Library of Congress or check any of the other thesauri that you want for things like subject headings. So if you find yourself in that position, you're like, yes, I need to add a new record, we'll look at how to do that. And Elizabeth says your first quarter update was done this week. I'm looking at your test system, but we can look at your production system too. I'm using some old stuff to look at though. Okay, so 2 methods for adding an authority record. You can do it from within the bibliographic record, which is what we're going to look at, or you can import it, which I'm not going to demo because an import is an import. But if you have pulled records out of any of the thesauri, if you've done it just like I showed you with the Library of Congress, you can download those one at a time. Same thing with Homosaurus or any other kind of authority record source you have, as long as you've agreed upon that it's one that you want to use. Then if you import those, it is going to require manual linking. I've got a note that here that automatic updates do not include linking existing bibs to new authorities. Let me say that again, because this is one of those things I have to always remember where I'm starting from when I say that. So if I already have bib records in my database and I decide I want to use a new subject heading that I've never used before, and let me stick with names probably. If I decide I'm adding a name or making a change to names, it's not automatically going to do that at this point. There are 2 things that are not automatically happening in this situation. The first one is that if I add a new authority record at all, it's not going to go back and link to any of my records that were in there before. If I make a change to an authority record, we now have the ability to propagate that back to old records. So that's a moment for celebration. And I've got that included on the next slide. So there are 2 different things to consider here. Am I just making a change to an authority record, or am I bringing in a new record? Authority record. If I'm bringing in a new authority record, it's not going back to the old bibs until it goes back out to backstage and then comes back. So that's going to happen in your quarterly process. If I think I need to make a change or I want to make a change to an authority record itself, up until about this time last year, we were still having the conversations about that also would not propagate back to the older bibs. Now it is possible. So I'll talk about how that's possible. And that's probably the biggest thing that's happened in authorities in the last year is it's brought on by the conversation about updating subject headings that are very much outdated, and Library of Congress is very slow to respond. Things like the illegal aliens subject headings that very much needed updating in every catalog everywhere, honestly. But we looked at ways we could update that outside of the regular Library of Congress subject headings. And one of those things we found we need to do was export records, clean them up, and then re-import records. And that's not, the lift of that is not as heavy as it once was. Again, that's probably a much bigger conversation for another time, other than just to celebrate with you that at least one of those things now has an option for propagating backwards to the old records. So let me just wrap up here before I look at Evergreen. I'm watching the time carefully. Is that your linked job runs? I did say it runs every night. It runs every night at 9 p.m. And it only checks the records that were edited by staff. I guess that's kind of redundant, but the records that were edited in the last 24 hours. So every night at 9 o'clock, it looks at anything that's been updated in the 24 hours since it ran before, and it will link your authority records with your bib records if it finds a match there. Here's my note. Queued ingest was released in 3.11. 3.11, just in the last year or so. And when it's properly installed, and I say that because it's not automatic just when you add when you upgrade to 3.11. we're still working with testing that here. Also, as frequently as, I mean, as recently as last week, honestly, with our system admin, this is Jason Boyer on our side, who is working on making sure that that queued ingest is in place. And what queued ingest does is it enables you to do these huge amounts of processing overnight so that it can be accomplished in a much faster pace than it was before, because it's not trying to take on the entire database all at once and bring things to a halt. Instead, it's doing it in a way that mm, I really wish I understood this a little better instead of saying it in just very simple terms, but it's not doing it in a linear way. What I mean, it's not doing it in that heavy way of we just need to stop and look at all the records before we can do anything else. So this doesn't slow things to a grind. It just kind of queues things up. It's like, you know what, I'm just going to keep looking at all these records while I can continue to operate on all the other things that need to run behind the scenes. Say that to say we're still testing it on our side, on a full heavy load, a full load there. But it is possible it was tested on a small, small test systems, and those being the community servers, that sort of thing. But this is great news that when we do have it up and running there, that if you make a change, like add a death date to a name field, or do something like change the illegal aliens to be something more representative of what we wanted to do now, you don't have to find all of those records and update them yourselves. This kind of propagation will happen automatically. So stay tuned for our results about how that's going. But it's very exciting. And then I'll leave. There's no current functionality to automatically link existing bibs to brand new authorities. And I covered that before, but this is the one that says if you make changes. It also tells you when it runs. Okay, quick state of things. I'll just finish this up before we look at Evergreen then. Homosaurus is now supported by Evergreen and Marchive and Backstage and even MarcEdit. So MarcEdit has a utility built in now for finding and attaching Homosaurus subject headings to your records. If you use MarcEdit heavily, there's all kinds of documentation on how to do that. But if you're working with an authority vendor, that may not be relevant at all because Backstage can do it for you. Other things that I said we've been working on is local subject headings, and we've got a variety of libraries that have examples of the things that they've done in the Evergreen community on that kind of a project. I mentioned queued ingest. And then here, before we look at Evergreen, I just want to put in a little plug. The Evergreen does have an authorities working group. We haven't met in the last couple of months, but we are picking that up this spring. And it is really just a matter of making authorities more understandable and documenting how things work in the system. I raise this to say that if you have questions about authorities, you are more than welcome to send your questions to me. You're also more than welcome to get involved with the authorities working group. And the best way to do that is just to send a note to the cataloging listserv, the Evergreen cataloging listserv. Currently, a couple of things that group is working on is KCLS has a missing links report. This happens after they bring in bib records and then their process runs overnight. And so the next day they'll pull a missing links. They're okay, we have new records. Is there anything that didn't get updated? Which is a very handy report that's going to be shared with the community very soon. And one of the members of the group is going to be doing a full authorities presentation at the upcoming Evergreen conference. So if you haven't registered for that, please do. And Elizabeth's putting the link to the various listservs in the chat. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so let's hop over to your system and just look at a couple of authority records. I think I can accomplish about 3 different things with one record. So let's do this. I first wanted to show you the 3 different ways you can find an authority record in Evergreen. Sadly, it's not by search the catalog in any way other than browse. Browse is literally searching your authority records. So if I want to search by author, I have to remember to put in my last name first. And what I'm going to get in my results, and of course I'm going to search the entire consortium. And it's very slow, which is why I'm going to show you another way you can get to those records. But if I am looking for a subject heading, this might be the way to go here. So if I'm looking for Marie Benedict, there I am. I have her in here a variety of different ways. I have her in just her name. I have her here with a creator qualifier. I have her there with a creator qualifier that looks like it's missing a period. And this is where the importance of consistency comes in. And then I also have one where she's a creator and an author. So here are 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways that we are seeing her represented. And in parentheses, you're seeing the number of bib records that are linked to that particular version of the name authority record. So let's look at the one that's the legitimate that I want there. Click on that. It's going to show me every bib record that is connected to her. You might wonder, all right, that's great. I really just wanted to look at the authority record. It didn't do that. No, it didn't do that. If I go into any of these and I want to choose Einstein specifically, because I also want to show you something else. Looking for the other Einstein. It's a little older, so I'll just. I do want to say that I've been looking at your catalog quite a bit. Your authority records are in good shape. They really are. Much better than the last few times I've done any kind of consulting on these. So congratulations on that. Which is why it was hard for me to find examples. And it had to be diacritics to show you. I should have written down this TCN, shouldn't I? Yes, I should. I am looking for the other Einstein. There she is. Okay. And I'm going to leave that one open because I want to come back and find this. That's what I'm going to show you. The diacritics matter. Okay. So in this, back to my point of, yes, I did a browse search and it didn't take me to the authority record. So how do I get to the authority record? Two more ways I can do that. One, I can go to cataloging. I can go to manage authorities. Here I search my authority type. First, I am going to look, notice it says author instead of name, but I'm still just searching for name as far as the authority record is concerned. I still have to remember to do it in the right form, in the right order, rather. There is no search button. This screen could use a lot of love. Once I get there, it's going to show me a little before and a little after so that I can see the things, see where I'm positioned in the link, in the headings here. I'm using names just because they're easier to see, but the other indices will work just the same, the other search types there. Notice my control set is Library of Congress, and notice my thesaurus. So here, if you're looking for a thesaurus that is not the Library of Congress subject headings, and if we went all the way to the end, you would see where there's some initial work on the homosaurus that's set up there, but then you could find that through looking at the thesaurus there. I am just going to click on her name here and see what happens. So here I have 52 linked bids. And here I actually finally get all the different records that are tied to hers. I don't instinctively see the authority record itself, but it lives here on the Edit tab. So I'm getting both the linked bibs, and I just have this set to rows 10, but I could see all of them on this list. Here's your column picker. If I want to download the whole list of them, I can do that. But here's my authority record. So finally, I'm seeing an authority record. Woohoo! Here's Marie Benedict and all the things I needed to say. And again, here you can see that I can use it as subject, not for serials. It's not subdivided, all the things we talked about before. So that was way number 2 to find a bib record. You go to cataloging, and then you go to manage authorities. Remember, the first way was browse. It didn't really take us to the authority record, but it got us the bib records that were linked to it. The other way I can do this is from the bib record. Pardon me, I've got a cough here. The other way through the bib record is that you go to there where it's linked already, or I find either where I need to an authorized value, whether this was linked or not, and I have the thing that looks like a link, honestly. So there's a little icon there. Even though I hope you can see this, it's a little small on my screen. So I've got Marie Benedict. She is already tied to an authority record. So if I want to see that one, if I click on the link, it's going to essentially do what I just did over in the Manage Authorities. It's going to bring up the options that apply here that says you might want these. Here's Marie Benedict. There's my C also. Very, very handy. So that now if I was actually looking for a pen name, this link over here is linked to the authority record. So that's the other way you can actually get to the authority record. I can apply it without getting over there, but if I want to look at it just to make sure it's the right one, that's the other way I can do that, straight from the bib record. Now, let's look at an option where we don't have something already linked. These I already have my biographical history, my historical fiction. See, women's physicist. This is the S that's there. This is not linked to one of yours because the TRUE is your code for your consortium. So if I wanted to put this into one of yours, it's probably because of this string here. So I am going to not go down that rabbit hole too far. But if I wanted to create one, I wanted to create a subject heading that specifically said women physicist, Germany, fiction, because there's not one now. What I do have is I have it that says women in physics. I have all these things that live there, but I don't have that specific one. If I felt like I really needed an authorized value, a subject heading that said these three things, and I wanted to link it to a record, I can just create it from this screen. I select all three of those substrings there, all three of those subfields, and I just say create and edit. It's going to give me a very blank record here. All I really need is that type Z that tells me it's an authority. That's all I really need. I can do a lot more than that here. I can add, what I can do here is I can add my, you can add a local note that says added for local, local authority control, that sort of thing, which is what you might consider. So any of your local notes there, I think 637 I've seen used before. You can do a variety of things here. This is one of those things you just might want to talk about is do you want to be adding extra subject headings to go down to this level of detail so that you could actually be able to validate these? I'm not going to do that, but other than to show you, just save your changes. I'm your test system, I'll save them. So now that I am there, and then I have one more thing I want to show you, and I realize our hour's almost up. It goes by so quickly. So here we are. So now I actually have this linked. And if I want to get back to this one, I can just jot down that number. And then if I want to make additional changes to it later, I can. But if I happen to have lots of records now about women physicists, Germany and fiction, I now have that to use in the future. But that's how you could very quickly add a new subject heading directly from your bib record without having to import one. You just have to decide what you want as a group that to look like when you add a new one. So now I wanted to look one last thing to talk about why diacritics matter. Diacritics matter because often diacritics do not translate well on your imports and exports, no matter who your vendor is. Sometimes they just get lost in the, dare I say, lost in the translation. Let me show you what's in your system now. And again, I say your authority control is in really great shape, so I had to find diacritics to be able to point this out. But here is one version of Einstein, and then those look almost the same, don't they? 1875 to 1948. No, they're duplicated. This is a bug. See, the authority number is the same, the 137413. There we are. Yeah, so that's good news. Actually, I cleaned them up yesterday. So if I wanted to look at these, there she is. You can see all these other versions of this that go in there. If I find that I want to update these, and I'm going to hop right back over to the authority itself and then leave that there and ask if you have any questions. And when I say hop back over here, I'm just going to go back to manage authorities. And there we are. Oh, see, that's the problem. Cleaning up over there. But if I found two, let's look at this one, for example. See, here's Alfred Einstein. There's one record that's got his full, it has to do with his music. And then here's, there's Albert, there's Alfred, and there's also the one in German. If you want to merge any of these, you can certainly do that. Let's say that I wanted to merge these two. All you have to do to merge them together, I probably don't because that's a music example, but all you do is you've got an actions menu here to where you can merge them. If you find that you have duplicates, it's really that easy just to merge them together and then all your bib records will be updated to follow. Okay. I wanted to make sure I got through all the examples about how to find your record, how to update your record both manually, and of course you can just import them. I say import your bib record works this. I mean, your authority record can be imported through your regular mark batch import export. If you're choosing to download those records out of the Library of Congress, you can come here and you just choose authority records instead to update. So you can load them in batch if you have a file of records that way. Okay, I'm going through my notes to make sure I got through all of those. I think I did. So let's go back to, I said I was going to end not on the question slide, but on this slide about to remind us of the 5 things we wanted to talk about: standardized vocabularies, linking the records. I mentioned several things you might want to consider for local custom practices. And then your record maintenance, you already have a quarterly process in place. So your record maintenance, really beyond that, is anything you want to do in between those 2 times. So I am going to leave that there just as a prompt for questions. And then I will make sure you all have my email address as well when I send this out. So let me stop and ask you about any questions, anything you wish I covered that I can follow up with you after this. Or have I demystified all of the authorities? Questions? My camera on. Say hello again. Hello again.
This was very helpful. We had an update that we wanted to make, and I wish I saw this before. It probably would have made it a lot less painful. So, thank you.
Welcome. Well, I am here for you. Anytime you have authority questions, don't hesitate to just send me an email. I mean, you can address them to me in a support ticket if you want, but for the rest of you, I'm certainly here, and let me put my email address back up there at the top. There I am. So anybody is welcome to contact me at any time with authorities questions. I don't mind. I consider that my contribution to contribute to the community, because that's one of the things that I do spend my community time on. So yeah, so let me know at all if you have any questions that you talk about afterwards about things that you might want to do. You try something out with authorities, well, that didn't work the way she said it would. Please let me know.
I do have a question. Do you know anyone who's using the Homosaurus?
MEC talked about it last year, and I tried to do a little research this week so far, and I haven't seen that they actually are using it.
Okay.
Noble maybe. I just don't have that kind of access to their system. So I'm going to raise that at the cataloging interest group, the Evergreen cataloging interest group this month, to see if anybody's using it yet. I know several have talked about it. I know MEC was using it as a resource to go out and look for subject headings and just add them to the record, but I don't think they've integrated it yet into Evergreen to validate in Evergreen. We'll find out.
Yeah. So I guess my follow-up question would be, is there another not more popular, but for those who have multiple thesauri, what are like the main ones that people tend to have outside of Library of Congress?
Honestly, the ones people I've seen used most often is just to create a local one. And that has come into play a lot with the Native American kind of standardizing the way you want to talk about both cultural and then identifying, well, an identity of the Native American population. And so I've seen that used, but it's either used, well, Canada has an authorized vocabulary around that that's growing. But other than that, I've seen people just create locals for that reason. Some of the others you can do are things like children's headings, decide whether or not you want to use them. And that's because there is that children's subject. Yes, I didn't cover that at all because I tend to find those redundant. You're going to get there one way or the other with children's headings, but you can use those as well.
Okay.
Now that I've said I don't, I didn't mean to prejudice that, but you can.
No. Well, thank you.
Certainly. Well, I thank you for the opportunity. And I said it would not take this long, but it always does. I should just know that when I start talking, I go off script. So thank you for letting me go off script. Well,
thank you so much, Jennifer.
You're so welcome. Like